Hi, my name is Tamara, and you are watching Things Even a Monkey Should Know. Hello, hello! Thank you so much for joining me again today. As you know, if you've watched some of my other videos, I am not a professional anything except artist, but I have learned there are a number of things around the house and out in the yard and on my cars that I can do myself, and often save myself time, money, and aggravation. So I hope you have saved those things now too. Well, where I am right now has nothing to do with what we're doing today, but it's such a glorious day and you can tell spring has finally arrived. So I wanted to share that with you here in the opening sequence. What we're actually doing today is applying veneer to the edge of plywood. So have you ever seen a plywood shelf that you didn't know was plywood? You thought it was solid wood until you looked closer. That's because it had a veneer around the edge so that you couldn't see those layers of wood glued together to make plywood. And believe it or not, it's really, really easy to do that. So since we finally got through our long chair reupholstering project, I thought that we would do something fairly quick today. I'm gonna have to ask you all to please forgive the slightly messy backdrop that we have today. We are in my studio where I have been working with all of this veneer. So yeah, that's where we are. So the first question is, what is veneer? Well, it is a lovely real wood that is very thin, that takes an edge, a raw edge, from looking like this to looking like this. Very professional and finished. So as I mentioned, it is real wood. I am working with birch right now. It comes in multiple widths, so I've seen it from 1/2 inch wide up to 2 inches wide, but you know, lots of increments in between. I'm working with 3/4 of an inch. It also has this very lovely heat activated glue on the back, and it comes sanded and ready to finish. So whatever you're working on, if you match the veneer to the plywood that you're using, if you know that's what you want to do, obviously you don't have to, but if that's what you're doing, then you can finish this just like you're finishing your plywood and everything will match, which is really pretty awesome. So the things that we're going to need today are definitely your roll of veneer. You're going to need to have measured whatever it is that you're working on. So we'll say your measured piece of wood. I'm working with a 3/4 inch thick plywood, and that'll tell you obviously what width of veneer you'll need to get. You are going to need some scissors to cut your veneer. Yes, you can just use plain old scissors to cut wood. It's kind of cool. You're going to need an iron to iron on the veneer. Isn't that crazy? And you can just use a regular old iron because this is not messy in any way. You don't have to worry about messing up your regular household iron. You also, if you wanted to, you could use a heat gun. In my case, I really like the control that the iron gives me so I don't have heat just blasting out everywhere. The last thing you're going to need is a piece of 220 sandpaper. Again, this comes pre-finished, so we don't want to use a really rough grit sandpaper on it because then you'll rough it up and then you'll have to re-sand it, and you know, why make more work for yourself? I think that's it, so let's get started. First thing that we're going to do is turn our iron onto the cotton setting and get it to heating up while we're setting up the rest of our space, which, I mean, there's not a whole lot to set up. First, make sure that your edge is nice and clean. So if you need to just simply dust that off or use a little bit of a cleaner on it, go ahead and do that now. If you use a cleaner, be sure that your edge is completely dry before you start trying to apply the veneer. Let me show you how super easy this is to do. I'm going to line up the edge of our veneer with the edge of our plywood, that corner right there. Provided that your iron is finished heating, I think most modern irons are pretty quick, we're going to just start ironing it. And I like to start by getting the edge tacked down so that I can move on and do the rest of the strip without accidentally moving the whole piece. And unless you leave this on for a really long period of time, you don't need to worry about scorch marks. I know y'all thought that I just burned myself, and I thought I did too, but I totally didn't. So now we're just ironing it, and you can still actually move the strip around until you allow it to cool. But I like to iron it until I can see the glue start to squeeze out the edges just a little bit. And then I put my iron down and I count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then typically this will be cool enough that it's not going to move, although it's still fairly warm. And then we can make our corner. And do I cut separate pieces for each side? I absolutely do not. I just very carefully bend this over the corner and start in on the next side. I chose this particular piece of wood that I'm working with because there's a short side and a long side, so that you can see how easy it is to do regardless of whether you're doing a long edge or a short edge. The main thing is just to take it in small increments. Make sure that you keep your fingers out of the way of the iron and keep the veneer aligned with the edge of your plywood. Just double check it ever so often. Now that we are at the end on our fourth side, I'm probably going to have to re-iron just a little bit here, but let's go ahead and just use our scissors to cut off as straight as possible. Actually, if you put flat-sided scissors against your piece or your shelf, and you get it pretty close. There's a mouth in here. So I'm going to go ahead and iron it down just a little bit more because I did pull it up while I was cutting just then. Now, while we let that cool, we're just going to go ahead and sand each of these little corners. Stick that just a little bit. And it just smooths out anything that might have happened on that corner. Then we get around to our final corner, and you can either take a really sharp knife and cut off this little bit of excess here, or you can just sand it off. And usually I just go ahead and sand it off because it's easier and it gets it more even. Now I'll have to go back and clean this edge later, but basically we just did it, and now we have a very nicely finished plywood edge. Make sure that you check the back, make sure that you don't have any gaps in the glue, or in the front also make sure that you don't have any gaps in the glue. But that is all there is to it. So I told you today was going to be quick and easy, right? Wasn't that wonderful? Now the great thing is that you can give your shelves or whatever your plywood projects are a finished look really just like that. This is also great because you know how over time, say with shelves, for example, they get nicks and scratches and dents and stuff in them. Well, hey, guess what? You can sand off the old edge that's damaged and you can just zip a new edge right on and bring those shelves back to life. Easy as that. Thank you so much for joining me again today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please go ahead and do that now. Thank you so much to everyone who already has. I look forward to seeing you again soon.